It's hard. There's a lot more now. I know there's a lot more now. I thought, I've been here 20 years. I was lucky. I kind of tried to talk a little bit about that at the start. I kind of, I got done. I played over there like 85, 86, and then by the time, I was kind of 25, 26, I sort of said, I want to, younger than that, probably early 20s. I was like, I want to get to the US and coach. That was my goal. How do I do that? Obviously I needed a college degree. You need a college degree to coach over here. So that's important. If you don't have a college degree, you need to think about that. Which is kind of weird though, because you don't need any kind of coaching certification over here. So you've got a lot of people that I don't think, honestly, a lot of coaches over here, in my opinion, couldn't coach a dog to bark. But, they're here, whereas, a lot of people in Australia, I think, are way more qualified. It's just a matter of how you get over here. So how do you attack that? I attacked that I had so many relationships with people in the States. I had so many people in America. And again, this is pre-internet, this is back in the VHS tape days where, that I had coaches over there that I knew that were players that were now coaches, or the assistants that were now head coaches or whatever, calling me and saying, hey, can you get this kid a game? I've got this kid, can you get him to your parents' club or somewhere else? So I saw that as an opportunity to build relationships in the US, but I also said, okay, it's costing me money, because back then, gosh, when you called America back then, it was a lot of money. It was like, I remember when I was playing over here back in the 80s, I'd call my dad and my mum and dad or whatever. We'd have a day set up, like a day and a time to make that phone call, because it was so expensive to call, back then. So, so I'm thinking, okay, I'll get these kids games, but how can I do that and not lose money? So I actually formed a business. And so I started a marketing agency, and I was representing players. And that's how I was sort of acting as an agent. And it kind of expanded out of basketball and into other sports. I was doing some cricketers and surf lifesavers and doing some other things, because the business kind of just took off. I had kids playing in the WNBA. I had, American kids playing overseas in Europe, and, obviously guys in Australia. And then I had a lot of NBA teams calling me for evaluations on different guys and all that sort of stuff. And again, this is back in the late 80s, early 90s. And then what started happening is people started realizing they could get players from Australia. So my mum and dad's club, we had quite a few players that were kind of looking at trying to, that I was kind of saying, hey, you should go to America. So I started sending players over there, and that kind of grew bigger than just my mum and dad's club. It turned into I was getting kids from all over the place. And it was back in the VHS tapes days. And back then, like you'd have to send a VHS tape, and then it'd take 2 weeks to get there. And then they'd have to convert that tape, right, from VHS that you could watch in Australia. You couldn't watch on American TV. So then they'd have to that would take another 2 weeks or however long it'd take, and $100 to get the tape converted if they didn't have the facility at their campus. So I got to the point where American coaches would call me and say, have you got a player? And I would recommend a player, and they just take them, on my recommendation, but that's because I built up these relationships, and then what happened was I got offered an opportunity to work for an American company. And I actually had the first internet recruiting site in Australia. I don't know if you remember that magazine. It used to be called Inside Australian Inside Sport or something. It was a glossy magazine back in the day. They did a story on me when the internet first came out, or people started using the internet in 1999 or 98. So I was doing it then, but I was doing all that stuff in order to build relationships so that ultimately I could get over here and coach. And what happened was I got lucky. I was working, trying to get there. And then a job came open at Boise State. What had happened is a woman I knew, and her and her husband, June Doherty and Mike Doherty, she was the head coach at Boise State. Husband Mike was the one of her assistants. They took the job at the University of Washington. The job at Boise State came open. One of her assistants had taken the head coaching job there, and they needed an assistant. They called me and said, hey, you want to do this? And I'm like, yep. And it was like 2 phone calls, and I had the job. Now, you can call that lucky, or you can call it, what do they say? The harder you work, the luckier you get, But I understand that was a great opportunity. And so, like I said, from there, I went over there. We were there for a year. We all got fired. And then I thought, oh, crap, well, that's the end of that. I guess I go back to Australia. They say there's only 2 kinds of coaches, those that have been fired and those that are going to get fired. So, I've already ticked that box off. And like I said, I was able to get on at Troy State University in Alabama. again, lucky, just, by now the internet existed, and, I got online, and then I called the office at Troy State University, and the head coach had just got the job, and he picked the phone up, which is not, sometimes that doesn't happen. And we started talking, and like I said, he'd played in New Zealand, and kind of, the light went off. And by the time I left Troy, I was there 4 years. We were starting 4 Australians. But basically, if you want to get over here, you've just got to build connections and get people to trust you. And, you've obviously got to be able to coach the game as well. But it's hard. But I mean, I think that's the only really the way to do it. And you've got to apply for jobs. You got to apply for jobs. And, and it goes back to some of the things I talked about earlier is, why do you want this job? And, is this job going to be a good job? And then, Australia has become, I think, a lot. I joke around about it. I say Australia is like another state of the US when it comes to recruiting, right? There's no secrets over in Australia anymore. Everyone's recruiting Australia. There's so many people in Australia that have a hand in some kind of helping kids to get over here and stuff like that. And I think, that's probably the best way to do it, and do your research, find out, if a team's taken a lot of Australian kids or, that kind of stuff. And then, I've started applying for jobs, but have contacts, have connections, have people in the US that can speak for you, that you have relationships with, that can call an AD and say, hey, you need to have a look at this guy or this, or this, woman or whatever it might be, and once you get here, if you can get over here and you can make it work, man, it's a great living, and I love basketball in Australia. I'd love to go back to Australia. But I always worry if I go back to Australia, and it doesn't work out at that job, what's my next job going to be? Whereas, over here, there's just so much more opportunity, and as good as basketball in Australia is, I'll probably never go home now. I shouldn't say that, touch wood, unless something bad happens and I can't find another job over here. So do your research, build connections, and apply for jobs. Long answer, sorry.
That's all good, mate. For representative coaches here in the Australian system, what advice could you give coaches that typically see their team 2 to 3 times a week to create a good vibe?
Well, I think, building relationships, with the kids so that they understand, again, the things I talked about, making sure they understand why you're doing this, making sure they understand your philosophy. We're coaches too, so there's always, it can't always be, hey, we love. Sometimes it's, there's heat of the moment stuff, and sometimes you've got to get a message across and all that, but it's much easier to get that message across or be a little vocal sometimes if the people know where you're coming from. I think the other thing is, like, when you're trying to create that vibe is, well, that feeling around your program is the ownership. Are they just showing up? And again, it's easier for me because, my kids live on campus. I see them every day. They're kind of a captive audience where you're getting kids that come into practice 2-3 times a week, whatever, and they're on 2 or 3 other teams and they've got a couple of other coaches or whatever. So, yeah, it's a little different. But I think, when people understand where you're coming from, what you're doing, how you're doing it, and why you're doing it, right? And then giving them ownership of the program. Letting them make some decisions, letting them understand that, what they do has a bearing on the success and the failure of the group. So hopefully that helps.
No, excellent, mate. We might save it for one more question, and then the remaining questions I might email to you so you can answer through email, and then I can.
I'd be happy to.
Perfect.
Yeah, for sure.
What advice would you give to your younger self?
Oh, dude, you need another hour for that. I think it's hard to say. I'm happy with how things worked out for me, but obviously we all make decisions as we go along, and we all maybe make bad decisions. We learn from those decisions. There's probably jobs that I was offered and didn't take that maybe I should have taken, or there's kids that I haven't recruited that I probably should have recruited, or, there's games that I've lost that I should have won because I made a bad decision, put the wrong play in, whatever. I mean, but you know, the advice I would give myself is just, you know, when I was younger, is that if you want this, and I wanted it bad, you know what I mean? Like I wanted it. I knew from the time I got a chance to, I knew when I was 12, 13 years old, I wanted to go play in America and see what it looked like. You know what I mean? Then I got a chance to come over here and play. And I knew from the time I got back that I wanted to get back there, you know? So, and I worked my tail off and had some luck and all that kind of stuff. But the advice I would give myself or anybody else is if you really, really want to do it and you have a belief and the drive, if you're prepared to do the work, I mean, if you've got a dream, you know, and again, I don't want to sound cheesy or whatever, but if you've got a dream, man, you got to get after it and just do what you can to make that dream happen. Sometimes it's going to happen. Sometimes it's not. But I mean, for the most part, if you do that, you're going to have success in whatever it is you're trying to do.